Welcome back, traveler. The fire is warm, and every fire has its story. So cozy up and prepare yourself for tonight's tale. For tonight's story is not written in the pages of history, but whispered between smoke and memory. Join me by the fire and enjoy the story. The fire had burned lower by the time the traveler continued. Most of the tavern now sat beneath a warm amber glow, shadows swaying softly across the rafters as the candles melted shorter beside half-empty cups and untouched plates. Outside, the fog around Dunmere had thickened so heavily that the windows reflected only the firelight within. The village felt very far away from the rest of the world. Perhaps that was why no one spoke, not after hearing about the keepers of the crossing. The traveler rested both hands around his cup. The monks allowed the four travelers to remain in the monastery for only one night. His voice remained calm and even, but before dawn, the oldest among them came once more to speak with Corvin. The fire crackled gently. He brought no lantern. A pause, and he carried a key made of black iron. Several listeners shifted slightly. The monk led Corvin alone beneath the monastery into chambers carved deep into the hill itself. The traveler looked toward the flames. Ancient halls, he said softly, far older than the monastery above them. The lute player near the wall leaned closer unconsciously. Corvin later described the walls as covered in circles and branching lines. The traveler traced faint shapes against the wooden table beside his chair. Maps, perhaps. Another pause. Or something older than maps. Outside, wind moved softly through the mountain streets. The monk stopped before a sealed stone door marked with the same symbol etched beneath the Ruby Bengal. A silence settled over the tavern. When Corvin asked what the place was, the monk answered, "Only this." The traveler lowered his voice slightly. "A room built for remembering." The fire shifted softly. "What was inside?" the innkeeper asked quietly. The traveler looked up. Nothing. Several listeners frowned. "At least," he said, "nothing visible." A small smile touched his face. Corvin claimed the chamber was completely empty except for a shallow stone pedestal at its center. Another pause. But the moment the bangle was placed upon it, the traveler's expression darkened slightly. The room awakened. Outside, somewhere beyond the tavern, a shutter creaked softly in the wind. The walls began glowing faintly. The traveler continued, "Not brightly, more like moonlight beneath water." He folded his hands together again, and across the stone appeared dozens of moving lines. The listeners remained silent. "Roads," whispered the innkeeper's daughter. The traveler nodded once. "Yes?" The fire crackled. "But not roads between cities." A pause. "Roads between worlds." The room fell completely still. Corvin asked the monk who built the chamber. The traveler's gaze drifted toward the dark windows. The monk replied that no one remembered anymore. Another pause. Only that the chambers existed before the fracture. The word lingered heavily in the tavern air. "The fracture," someone repeated softly. The traveler nodded. The old monk claimed there was once only a single world. He let the silence settle naturally after that. "One sky," he continued quietly. "One sea, one history." The fire dimmed lower, but something happened. His voice softened further. A war, perhaps, or a catastrophe no one survived well enough to describe clearly. The villagers listened without movement now. The monk believed the worlds had not been created separately. A pause. They had been divided. Outside, fog pressed silently against the windows of the sleeping stag. And, according to the monks, the traveler said, the keepers of the crossing were the last guardians capable of moving safely between those divisions. Another pause. The Ruby Bengal belonged to one of their bloodlines. The innkeeper frowned slightly. So only certain people could use it. Yes, the traveler replied, or at least use it correctly. A log collapsed gently inside the hearth, sending sparks swirling upward. The next morning, the travelers prepared to leave the monastery before sunrise. The traveler's tone shifted subtly now, calmer, but heavier. Corvin wished to remain longer and study the chamber further. A faint smile crossed his face, but Thomas objected immediately. Several villagers exchanged knowing looks. He believed the monks were hiding something valuable. The traveler chuckled softly. Thomas believed most people were hiding something valuable. A few quiet laughs broke the tension briefly. But that night, the traveler continued, Thomas made a decision that nearly doomed them all. The room quieted again, instantly. He waited until the others had fallen asleep. The firelight flickered across the traveler's face. Then he stole the bangle. Outside, wind whispered softly through the fog-covered streets. He intended to leave the monastery alone. Another pause, and for a short while, the traveler looked slowly into the flames. He almost succeeded. The tavern remained silent enough to hear the rainwater dripping from the roof outside. But as Thomas crossed the monastery courtyard, the traveler said quietly, the bangle began to glow. A child near the hearth pulled her blanket tighter again. At first he thought moonlight had struck the ruby. The traveler's voice lowered further. But then the shadows around him changed. The fire cracked softly. The monastery courtyard disappeared. Silence. And standing where the courtyard should have been, another pause, was a shoreline beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. No one in the tavern moved. Thomas later claimed he could hear waves breaking somewhere far away. The traveler's eyes reflected the flames once more. And voices. A pause. Hundreds of distant voices. Outside, the fog deepened around Dunmere, while inside the warmth of the tavern held fast against the dark. The traveler leaned back slowly in his chair. And that, he said softly, was the first time the bangle opened a path.